People are not afraid of being abandoned. They're afraid of becoming invisible to the one they once gave their whole heart to. Carl Jung. You know what hurts the most after being involved with an avoidantly attached person? It's not that they left. It's the way they still haunt your emotional world, ghosting your heart, not your phone. They don't message you, but they always watch your stories. They don't love you, but they won't let you move on. They go cold, like you never existed until you finally start to heal, and then they come back. You're left wondering, is this a sign of deep feelings, or just emotional manipulation disguised as mystery? And while you're decoding them, you slowly lose your sense of self. Modern culture teaches us how to attract, but not how to discern true love from emotionally unsafe obsession. Avoidant mind games are not just behavior, they're a psychological loop that keeps you addicted. In this video, we're going to peel back every layer of these subtle tactics, not to blame them, but to free you. Why do avoidant people pretend to be unaffected? You've seen that look, that cold, emotionless gaze during an argument. No tears, no softness, no sign that they're hurt, or even that they care. You think, maybe they never really loved me. But that's the first emotional trap avoidants create. They make you believe that you never mattered. So you turn inward and start to question yourself. What did I do wrong? How little must I be worth for them to walk away so easily? But here's the truth, they didn't walk away easily. They just hide their emotions better than you do. In attachment theory, John Bowlby once said, "Attachment doesn't disappear just because someone doesn't show it. It simply goes underground where it continues to operate silently and destructively." Avoidants aren't emotionless. They are afraid of emotions. Afraid of their own desire for closeness. That's why they must cut off their feelings before those feelings make them vulnerable. This comes from a deeply rooted belief, often shaped in childhood. If I show how I feel, I will be rejected, abandoned, or controlled. So they choose a highly sophisticated defense mechanism. They act like you mean nothing. Not because you truly don't matter, but because if you did, they'd be forced to face the part of themselves they've buried for years. The fear of being hurt through attachment. Avoidantly attached people in modern relationships aren't just cold. They are people who feel deeply, but are programmed to never stay too close. They use intellect to protect the heart. They use freedom to cover up the fear of being controlled. And they use distance to avoid the terrifying truth that if they let you truly in, you might see the part of them they deny, the part that's vulnerable, longing, and aching to be loved. So when you see them pretend to be unaffected, go silent like you never existed, or act as if they've moved on completely, please understand, they're not running from you. They're running from their own emotional reality. That's what makes avoidants such quiet yet powerful emotional tacticians. They don't say much, but their behavior always sends one clear message. I'm still here, but you'll never know what I truly want. Ironically, they're far more obsessed with you than you think. They think about you. They check your stories. They replay the memories. But instead of returning with vulnerability, they return with strategy. A random story on Instagram, a casual check-in text, a coincidental run-in. These gestures don't come from connection. They come from the fear of being forgotten. And when you respond with hope, or even with anger, they feel safe again, not because you still love them, but because they still control the emotional rhythm between you. So what should you do? Remember, not everyone who seems cold is strong. Sometimes they're just trembling behind a wall of logic. You can't heal them by becoming more patient or proving your love. You can only protect yourself by refusing to be pulled into the fog of emotional ambiguity they create. And now that you understand that their insensitivity is just a mask forged from unhealed wounds, let's get into the specific psychological games they use to maintain a connection with you without having to face real intimacy. Let's start with one of the most common and painful games. 1. The hot and cold game. They show up with the exact emotional energy you've been craving. Constant texting, openly sharing deep personal things, warm gestures that make you think, they must really love me. Oh. Then one day silent, nothing, as if you never existed, as if they vanished from your world. Why? According to Bowlby, 1969, and later Main and Solomon, 1986, people with avoidant attachment have learned that the more intimacy there is, the higher the risk of getting hurt. They condition themselves with an unconscious belief. Attachment equals danger. So, they become very skilled at initiating emotional connection, only to suddenly withdraw the moment it starts to feel real. But the withdrawal is never final. They always come back. And not because of regret, but because they sense you're starting to pull away. They can feel their control slipping, so they return to restore the emotional rhythm. This is what psychologists call the push-pull dynamic. And you, caught in this emotional dance, become the one constantly trying to hold the relationship together. When they push away, you move closer. When they return, you open the door again. You tell yourself, maybe this time it's different. But it's not. Every cycle brings you back to the same place. They only return when you're about to walk away. Many studies suggest that this is not emotional partnership, it's a system of regulating power and control. When they leave, you touch your abandonment wound. When they return, you're emotionally moved. But what you're feeling isn't love, it's a biochemical reaction. The felt experience. You get tricked by rare moments of emotional openness, but they only offer just enough to keep you from leaving completely. 2. They pretend to be unaffected. After everything, the late-night talks, the trembling hands, those moments when you thought they had finally let you in, now you watch them walk away, cold and calculated. No hesitation, no emotion. They look fine, still going to work, still hanging out, still posting smiling photos like you never existed. And that's when your heart starts to tighten, not because you can't accept the breakup, but because you can't understand how someone could detach this easily. But the truth is, they haven't detached. They've just buried it. Avoidant individuals don't process emotions by expressing them. They deal with them by suppressing and denying them. According to Mikulincer and Shaver, 2007, avoidants use what's called deactivating strategies, shutting down emotional systems by disconnecting from vulnerability and intimacy. They convince themselves, this doesn't affect me, not because they're strong, but because they're terrified to feel. To them, real emotion equals real risk. And in the internal world of the avoidant, vulnerability is the biggest danger. So instead of letting their heart hurt and heal, they take the opposite route. They freeze it from the start. No dialogue, no emotion, no admission. They build a numbed version of themselves, a fortress, to protect against the threat of longing, regret, or loss. To you, it might look robotic, but inside, they are spiraling in ways they can't even name. They might miss you, but they won't come back. They might ache, but they won't allow themselves to show it. They need you, but don't know how to need anyone without losing control. Worse yet, sometimes this unaffected act becomes a psychological manipulation. They know you're hurting. They know you're waiting for a sign, for something that shows they care, but they withhold it on purpose. Not because they want you to let go, but because they want you to question yourself, to wonder, am I being dramatic? Am I imagining this? That's how they keep you trapped in the fog, a space where you can't fully be angry, but also can't move on. It's a silent but potent tactic, driven by their need to control the emotional atmosphere without taking emotional responsibility. And sometimes, they don't just play neutral, they perform happiness. They post pictures with someone new. They write captions about freedom or peace. They smile wider in every photo. But this is not healing, it's presentation. They're not living. They're performing so that you believe they're okay. And if you believe it and feel like you've lost, then maybe you'll try harder. And if you try harder, they regain emotional control. Not a victory of love, but a victory of ego. So what's real here? The unaffected version of them isn't their truth. It's a defense mechanism, a survival reflex. It's how they avoid confronting the reality that they're losing something meaningful, not because you're unworthy of love, but because they're not ready to face their true self. When pretending to be unaffected is no longer enough to push you away, when you still cling to hope, still look for any trace of emotion left in them, the avoidant shifts gears. They enter a deeper psychological tactic. They won't push you out, but they also won't let you in. They begin to mirror you, but with precision and purpose. 3. Strategic mirroring. If you've ever felt like this person could read your energy and match it exactly, that's not intuition. That's emotional strategy. When you go quiet, they withdraw. When you reach out, they respond just enough to make you believe they still care. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that every reaction from them comes half a beat after you. Not because they're shy or unsure, but because they're waiting for you to lead. so they can control the level of closeness without feeling exposed. This isn't a mutual connection. It's a form of emotional calibration designed to keep you in a state of emotional limbo, not too close to feel secure, but not far enough to let go. In attachment psychology, this is linked to emotional boundary control. Avoidants don't usually create distance outright. Instead, they mirror the other person, ensuring they never reveal their true self first. It's as if they're managing the thermostat in a room. When you turn up the warmth, they reflect it. When you go cold, they freeze too. But the one holding the thermostat is always them. Your emotional state in this phase becomes deeply conflicted. You see them trying, but you don't feel them truly initiating. You think maybe they just need more time. But in truth, they're watching you, trying to gauge emotional safety so if things fall apart, they won't be the one who gets hurt first. This strategy has a subtly manipulative power. It makes you doubt yourself. You start wondering if your expectations are too high, if you're asking for too much. But that's exactly what strategic mirroring is designed to do. Make you believe the relationship is progressing, when in fact, it's being carefully held in place. And when the strategic mirroring has kept you lingering long enough uncertain, uncommitted, they shift to a more emotionally provocative tactic: jealousy. Not to hurt you, but to confirm that they still have power over your heart. 4. Jealousy triggers. One day, they post a photo having dinner with someone. It's vague, could be a friend, a coworker, or someone new, but the setting is just intimate enough to sting. The next day, they share a sad love song, write a cryptic caption, or post a selfie, staring straight into the camera like they're silently sending a message to you. They say nothing to you directly, but everything they post feels deliberately crafted for you to see. Nothing about this is accidental. Avoidants, for all their claims of indifference, are hyper-aware of whether or not they still impact you emotionally. But because they're terrified of rejection or revealing too much, they won't ask you outright. Instead, they provoke you through jealousy, one of the most visceral and uncontrollable emotions. And if you react even subtly by pulling back, acting distant, or posting something in return, they immediately feel the emotional win. They know you're still there. You become a mirror for their power. If you're jealous, you still care. And for an avoidant, being longed for from afar feels much safer than being emotionally available in real connection. The painful truth? They're not doing this because they want to reconcile. They're doing it because they're afraid of being forgotten. They want you to remain hooked, still thinking about them, still holding space in your heart, even if they have no intention of actually showing up for that space. This isn't just immaturity. It's a strategic form of emotional control. Because jealousy isn't just an emotion, it's proof. Proof that you're still emotionally invested. And that's all they need to keep their sense of power without having to commit to anything at all. 5. They watch you from afar. When they stop reaching out, when all signals from them seem to vanish, you assume they must have moved on. But strangely enough, they're still there. Not in your messages, not through their words, but through silent digital footprints, viewing your Instagram stories moments after you post them. You notice they still lurk on Facebook, TikTok, maybe even LinkedIn, like they're standing at the edge of your life, watching from a distance. This kind of observation is never random. Avoidantly attached individuals can't tolerate emotional closeness for long. But like every human, their nervous system still craves connection. So instead of stepping forward and facing the vulnerability of intimacy, they choose something safer, staying on the outside, looking in. They want to feel your presence in their world, but they don't want to fully enter yours. This is a subtle yet deeply manipulative pattern psychologists call covert attachment, a connection that isn't named, claimed, or openly acknowledged, but still haunts both parties. It gives them a false sense of closeness without having to risk emotional pain. And here's the trap. Once you realize they're still watching, a small spark of hope begins to light up. Maybe they still care. Maybe this means there's a chance. So you begin to react the way they subconsciously want. You post more stories. You carefully curate your images. You accidentally reference something nostalgic just to see if they're still watching. In doing so, you re-enter their emotional orbit, even if no words are spoken. They don't need to say anything. They don't need to promise anything. Their silence, timed perfectly with just the right amount of passive presence, is enough to make you stay emotionally stuck. And that's the true purpose of this kind of distant monitoring. to keep you preoccupied so they don't have to confront their fear of intimacy. 6. Leaving the door half open. They don't move forward, but they also never truly walk away. They say things like, "I'm not ready for a serious relationship right now. You're an amazing person. I'm just not in the right place. Maybe one day, we'll find our way back to each other." It sounds sincere, gentle, honest, but in truth, it's their way of keeping you close without having to commit. Avoidant people fear being tied down, but they also fear losing emotional control. So they offer you a door that's never closed, but never open enough to walk through. You're left hovering at the threshold, not kite in, not kite out. They don't say yes, but they don't say no either. And you begin to live in a relationship without definition. You're not officially their partner, but you can't quite let go either. You stop asking questions, fearing you'll ruin the fragile link. You try harder. You show up more. You tell yourself, maybe if I'm patient, they'll choose me. Maybe one day. But that someday never comes. This isn't honesty. It's an emotionally calculated delay tactic. Psychologists call it breadcrumbing, giving someone just enough attention to keep them around, while never actually stepping forward. The danger in this isn't sharp pain, it's the slow erosion of your confidence, your boundaries, your clarity. You become confused. You get tired. You begin to wonder if you're asking too much, when in fact, you're asking for the bare minimum. And here's the truth. Someone who truly loves you doesn't leave you waiting. They don't create distance and call it space. They don't use vague promises to avoid real responsibility. If they want you, they'll open the door fully. If they don't, it's not your cue to keep waiting. It's your cue to walk away, not because you weren't enough, but because you finally know your worth is too much for halfway love. 7. They create confusion on purpose. If you've ever felt like you're in a relationship where sometimes you're loved deeply and other times you feel like a stranger that's not random, it may be the result of a very intentional tactic, creating confusion on purpose. They tell you that you matter, but they're never really there when you need them. They send warm, affectionate texts, then disappear for days without explanation. They initiate deep conversations only to shut down when you ask about the future. The more you seek clarity, the more they avoid it. And the more confused you become, the more they retain control over the emotional rhythm of the relationship. Confusion isn't a side effect, it's a strategy. This push-pull dynamic activates your attachment system. According to neuroscience and attachment theory, unpredictable emotional responses stimulate more dopamine in the brain, which means you can become addicted to emotional inconsistency, like a gambler chasing a win that never fully comes. Avoidant people often aren't emotionally mature enough to love clearly, so they keep you in a gray zone where they don't have to commit, but also don't have to let you go. They use contradiction to make you question yourself, instead of questioning their own behavior. And suddenly, you're stuck. You're not sure what this relationship even is. You don't want to leave because you're afraid of losing potential. You're scared to move forward because you don't know what they really want. But remember this, confusion is not connection. Emotionally healthy people do not leave you guessing. Love is not a scavenger hunt. Love is presence, clarity, courage. If someone keeps you confused for too long, it's not because you're too sensitive or overthinking. It's because they are keeping you in emotional limbo to hide their own emotional limitation. And you deserve better. You deserve someone who doesn't make you doubt every time you feel deeply. You deserve a love that isn't built on uncertainty, but on trust, transparency, and truth. If you find yourself constantly guessing, waiting, and decoding someone who's never clear, you may be loving someone who's not ready to love. Mind games aren't proof of deep affection. They're signs of fear, avoidance, and control. You don't have to stay just to prove your worth. Real love doesn't require strategy. Real love chooses you clearly, completely, and with the courage to stay.